Welcome back to the Underground Football Podcast, a show where we talk about anything and everything NFL football from underneath the ground. Alongside my co-host Priller, I'm Mike, and let's jump right into it. In today's episode, we're going to be going over our thoughts on this year's 2022 Buffalo Bills. Um, Jack, would you like to say something? Say hello, introduce yourself. How are you feeling today?
Feeling pretty good, Mike. I'm honestly just ready to jump right into this analysis on the Buffalo Bills, and I'm ready to talk about them.
All right, sounds good. So with the Buffalo Bills, obviously, last year going 11-6 in the 2021 season, making the 3 seed in the playoffs, had the number one ranked defense as well as the highest point differential and margin of victory. Obviously, losing to the Chiefs in the playoffs, Mahomes showing his magic, 13 seconds left, making that comeback was obviously, um, you know, no Bills fans' favorite play to watch, but nonetheless, we're moving on to 2022. We're looking at the new Bills, and yeah, let's start with the quarterback room here, headlined by Josh Allen, obviously. Um, Now we've gone over Josh Allen a little bit in our top quarterbacks episode previously, but what are your thoughts on Josh Allen here, Jack?
Well, you see, Josh Allen is no sore for side eyes. He's an amazing quarterback. He's arguably top three quarterbacks in the league. Um, he finishes. He's an explosive quarterback coming out. He leads the offense. You can obviously tell that by how has that chemistry with his team. We mentioned in our podcast how he's very explosive. He's able to make plays with his legs. He just has that QB experience, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. He can just do it all. He really knows what he's doing. And yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think Josh Allen, probably the best athlete at the quarterback position that's in the NFL today, and has great speed with his legs, but can also throw the ball probably the farthest out of anybody in the NFL today. So yeah, you're definitely looking at a guy like Josh Allen as a
A
perfect,
leader.
yeah, franchise quarterback ready to lead your team to the playoffs at least, maybe Super Bowls, who knows. But yeah, Josh Allen, obviously, we both have him very, very highly ranked in the rankings of quarterbacks in the league. And backups, Case Keenum, Matt Barkley, nothing really there to write about. I mean, you're here for Josh Allen, obviously. Like the Bills are Josh Allen. Josh Allen is the Bills. Bills Mafia would be, distraught without Josh Allen. So if Josh Allen's gone, injury, I'm not going to wish anything on anyone. Obviously, we want to see Josh Allen healthy. He's one of the most entertaining players to watch. But, Case Keenum and Matt Barkley aren't necessarily your best backups. Um, but yeah, I mean, Josh Allen, you're happy to know he's your starting quarterback.
Yeah, and I just want to add, with someone who's able to he's kind of that guy that will put his shoulder down to fight for those extra yards. You're not really worried about him getting injured. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to
I
put that out
think I
there.
think with how big he is, even getting hit by like the bigger defensive players, like defensive linemen, linebackers, like he can withstand those hits. He's a big guy, so obviously he's no like Kyler Murray where you're worried about him getting hit because he's so much smaller than these guys. He's bigger than a lot of the guys that are probably going to be anywhere near him. So yeah, all right. We'll move on now to the running back room, which I'd say it's kind of a committee. I mean, you have your number
Yeah.
one guy, um, but I think everybody here, and by everybody I'm meaning these four guys, are gonna get, they're gonna get some touches. Maybe three. I don't know if Duke Johnson's gonna get too much work, but I think obviously Devin Singletary seems like your number one guy. Um,
Yeah.
and then
I
you
would agree with
move
that.
and you have Zach Moss and the rookie James Cook, Dalvin Cook's brother. And I think you're looking at a running back room that's going to be led by somebody, but it's also going to have people that have different roles. Um,
Yeah. I think they all bring us something different to the table. It's all they're gonna have, like, their carries are gonna be sprinkled in there. I could see James Cook getting some touches, even though he is a rookie and he is stepping into their role. But I mean, as you can look, if you look on ESPN's, they have him actually listed as a second string running back, which is kind of surprising coming out of college with like Zach Moss, who has been kind of in that solid second role for Devin Singletary. And I believe Devin Singletary was injured for some of the games last year. I believe Zach Moss did step in for a couple of those games, and I think he performed.
Yeah, and I
pretty
mean,
well.
you look at last year's stats, and you have Devin Singletary with 870 yards, which obviously that's not your like workhorse type of numbers. So he's not going to
Yeah,
be your workhorse back. I mean, he's 5'7". You don't want him being your workhorse. I'm talking about Kyler Murray getting hit. Devin Singletary is even smaller than him. So, 870 yards isn't bad. That's obviously a starting running back amount of yards, but you look at a guy like Zach Moss, who was the second string guy last year, had 345 yards. So I think this year you'll look to have three guys kind of getting
those
a
touches. Yeah,
similar amount of carries where, Devin Singletary had 188 attempts last year and Zach Moss had 96. I think James Cook is going to come in and not demand carries, but he's going to be worthy of, getting him the ball and seeing what he can do. And I think, James Cook is going to be more working with the receivers. He's gotten some work with, or not receivers, but the receiving back type role. He's gotten work with the receivers in training camp as well as Duke Johnson. I think those will be your guys, third and 10. Um, the defense knows you're passing. You bring in a guy like James Cook or Duke Johnson, that's when you're gonna see those guys, and they'll get their rushing numbers as well. But I think they'll get most of their you know receptions or most of their touches, I guess, out of receptions out of the backfield, and yeah. So running back room very interesting to me. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I think Devin Singletary will probably start out being the starter, and depending on how he does, depending on how James Cook looks, things could change as the weeks go on.
yeah. I just wanted to add, this does seem like one of the more like stacked running back rooms, like when it comes to like being able to actually have like some three solid running back carries. I mean, I know they obviously believe very highly in James Cook, taking them with their second round pick. So I do like what you're kind of like adding on to what you were saying. I do see them. I do see them change like actually handing him the ball off and not just kind of having him sit behind Devin Singletary or Zach Moss. I do see them actually using him, and so that's why I'm kind of hinting at the fact that their running back room is kind of stacked
Yeah, definitely.
with
I
talent.
think
Yeah.
I think having the ability to have multiple running backs so that when a guy on your team gets tired, you can put fresh legs out on the field immediately. That's so valuable. I mean, a lot of these teams like, have one dominant workhorse back and they may be great, but after, 20 carries, that guy's going to get a little bit tired. I'm thinking of guys like Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey's gotten injured so much because of that. The Bills definitely have that deep backfield where you can get a bunch of guys. Fresh legs are always going to be on the field. Nobody's going to be tired, and I think that'll lead to some explosive plays that you may not see from guys that are getting 20 attempts a game.
Yeah.
All right, we'll now move on to the receivers, the wide receiving room. Um, Obviously, you have your main guy in Stephon Diggs. Nobody's gonna doubt that. In my opinion, top five. You could say top 10, but I think top five, top 10. You can't have him outside of that. Stephon Diggs is unbelievable. He was unbelievable with the Vikings, and now he's come to the Bills with Josh Allen, and the two of them have created an unbelievable connection. So I think Diggs is obviously, your number one guy, but I think they got some guys that they brought in this year and some guys that are returning from last year that you're looking to see some production outside of just Stephon Diggs. Um, So guys like Gabriel Davis, for example, is a guy that played last year for the Bills. Had a great playoff run, had a couple touchdowns in the playoffs, and looked like a really good complement to Stephon Diggs, a really good number two receiver. And so I think Buffalo's definitely looking for him to take that step up to be able to complement Stephon Diggs. And I think you saw flashes of that in the playoffs, but maybe not. Um, the consistency that you'd be hoping for. And they had guys like Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley that have now exited the building, and those are guys that are more consistent possibly. But I think Gabe Davis has the capability of being better than both of those guys. So he's the younger guy, more athletic. So you're looking for Gabe Davis to kind of take over that role as the number two receiver probably this year.
Yeah, and honestly, talking about another receiver that from the Bills that probably should be looking to step up is Isaiah McKenzie. Normally, he's kind of looked at as a guy who's like a special teamer. He's your guy that will take it to the house on your punt returns or your kicks. But honestly, I could see him moving into a bigger role this season, coming in at the third wide receiver, maybe even the fourth wide receiver ish, just being that guy that's like he's like your speed guy. Once you want the ball in his hands and he can make it happen on the field. And so I do see him coming into this bigger role and just seeing Josh Allen actually connect with him and just build this connection where they can obviously be dominant on offense.
I also see Isaiah McKenzie in a role similar to a Debo Samuel, getting him at out of the backfield, getting him some running back reps to maybe just get the ball in his hands. Like you said, he's great on those punt returns, kick returns, at just avoiding tackles and taking the ball to the house, like you said. So getting the
Yeah,
ball in his hands as easy as possible might be something you see this year. I think guys like James Cook and Isaiah McKenzie will have similar roles where, they'll be out at receiver, they'll be in the backfield, and just trying to get these weapons the ball to see what they can do after the catch. But I'd also like to mention Jamison Crowder as this team's slot receiver. Obviously, going to be great over the middle for Josh Allen. Josh Allen loves to go over the middle, on those play actions where he's booting outside and extending plays. Jamison Crowder coming across on those, shorter middle of the field routes. He's got a pair of
hmm
sure hands. Jamison Crowder should be getting a good amount of receptions this year. Maybe a good guy to target in late rounds of your fantasy, but he's that guy, 3rd and 2, you need it. Jameson Crowder's going to get open in that short game, and yeah, you should see a pretty good overall wide receiving room out of the Buffalo Bills this year. You have a guy like Tavon Austin. Not going to say that we're expecting anything out of him, but we've seen flashes. We've seen him in college. You never know. Guys like, him and Isaiah McKenzie, just guys that are good to have on the team
speed
to have the
demons.
ball in their hands and gadget plays just to mess with the defense. So I think as a whole, the wide receiver room for the Bills is obviously very strong. You're very happy with obviously Diggs. I mean, we didn't really go too in depth on Stephon Diggs, but he's one of the best receivers in the league. No weak points this entire
Phenomenal
game.
route runner.
Unbelievable route runner, like you said. Unbelievable speed. Great after the catch. Just great hands. Everything. He's unbelievable. So we didn't really touch too much on Stephon Diggs, but I think that's just a compliment to him and how he doesn't need to be, talked about too much.
Yeah, I would agree
So
on that.
now we'll jump into the tight end room, which got a little bit stronger this year, in my opinion. You have Dawson Knox, who's coming from last season. One of the
A
better tight
solid
ends
tight
in the
end.
league, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, last year he had 587 yards, but 9 touchdowns is nice. So he's your red zone target. Nice tall guy that Josh Allen can see as he's a tall guy as well. The two of them can be peeking over the rest of the shorter defenders, and I think Dawson Knox, you're definitely happy with him being your number one tight end, but OJ Howard coming in as your backup tight end, having that speed aspect, having that athleticism aspect, I think OJ Howard's an underrated pickup for the Bills here. If they want to have two tight end sets, you have two, in my opinion, starting caliber tight ends on your team. So they go with the wide receiver room as just even more depth all around. But these will be your guys that you're looking at in the red zone and like kind of like a Jamison Crowder, short over the middle type routes, and they'll be super consistent for Josh Allen.
Yeah, kind of going in back to Dawson Knox. You were mentioning him as like Josh Allen's kind of guy. I do like just point out some stats. I mean, like on 71 targets, he's catching 49 receptions. I mean, that's pretty good reception rate in my opinion. He's so I would just kind of consider him as like a very consistent catching tight end. I mean, he's your red zone guy, like you mentioned, having 9 touchdowns. That's pretty good, and he also had 2 touchdowns in the postseason. Pretty surprising. Um, but yeah, I do see him being a nice red zone threat for Josh Allen. And then kind of like touching on OJ Howard. I mean that like you were saying, obviously, it is to beef up their tight end room when they had who was their other tight end? Drawing a blank right now. Tommy Sweeney. I like this guy. I don't think I've ever heard of him, but OJ Howard is definitely an upgrade to Tommy Sweeney. Um, I do see he does make their tight end room definitely stronger in that aspect. And like you were saying, it offers the Bills um a new look because with their new offensive coordinator that the offensive coordinator that they hired this year, I would like to see how they're going to play it with this new tight end and their obviously their new receiver that they mentioned or that they got this season or this offseason.
Yeah, and I also think, we got to mention how both of these tight ends aren't necessarily the best run blockers, but with the Buffalo Bills, it's a passing offense. I mean, it's a passing
Yeah.
league overall, but the Bills especially, you don't see them run the ball as much as your average team, similar to the Chiefs in that they like to air the ball out. So I think the tight ends not having the best run blocking ability isn't going to hurt this team at all. I think they're serviceable. They're not bad in any sense, but they're no George Kittle or anything like that. And yeah, so I mean, any other things to add on the tight ends, wide receivers, running backs, quarterback, anything with the skill positions here on offense to touch on?
No, I mean just kind of like hinting at what you were saying. It does, like you were saying, it is a very airtight offense. Basically, they really just focus on really going straight air for this one. Like I was saying, they do have a lot of like receiving backs, how you were mentioning, and their receiving room is pretty like juice. I would say they got a lot of consistent, nice guys who can get separation on corners. So I do see them just like continuing what they have done in the past, which is just air the ball out.
Yeah, I think it's a strong offense overall. I mean, we haven't got into the entire offense, but the skill positions, I guess, I'm talking about are tops in the league. You're not going to find many teams with a better quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end room than the Buffalo Bills here. So you're super happy with how everybody's going to complement each other, and all this different skills and different abilities that all these guys have to work together and make this offense what was the number one rated offense last year. So you'll see them trying to improve on that if they can, with some new additions as well. So now we'll jump in to the offensive line. We won't go over each guy individually, but just as a whole, it's a very solid unit. Um, you got Deion Dawkins starting at left tackle. Roger Saffold's a little bit shaky there. I'll let you get into that. Mitch Morse is solid. Ryan Bates at right guard and Spencer Brown at right tackle. And you gotta talk about Deion Dawkins. Gotta just mention, he made the Pro Bowl last year. He's really good left tackle. Obviously, you paid him as such. He's one of your top five paid players on your team. So Deion Dawkins is really the anchor to that offensive line, holding Josh Allen's blind side. But overall, great unit up front to protect your franchise quarterback.
Yeah, and just kind of getting more into that. I would just jump into it real quick. You were mentioning Robert Saffold. You know, he had a car accident injury. He injured his ribs, so they haven't seen him on the training camp field yet. So that would be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. But kind of how just touching on how their line is kind of very solid. Josh Allen only got sacked 26 times, I believe. Yeah, let me see one more time. Yeah, Josh Allen only got sacked 26 times last season, which that's a pretty low number coming from a Seahawks fan who Russell Wilson gets sacked. Russell Wilson got sacked a shit ton. So that I mean that kind of plays into it. I mean they are a very solid O line, and I do see them obviously continuing with their passing stuff. You don't see them creating the biggest holes, obviously for the running back, but they do know how to hold a block well, and they do know how to let Josh Allen see the field and get his job done.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, number one rated offense for a reason. This offense as a whole should be very similar to the 2021 number one offense. So we're thinking very highly of the Buffalo Bills offense, and I think it's time now to jump into the defense here for the Buffalo Bills. Um, with a couple new additions in the starting lineup. We'll start on the defensive line, I guess. We'll start with the edge rushing group, with obviously your big new addition, Von Miller, on the defensive linebacker, just edge rusher in general. He's going to get after the quarterback. We got him a 6-year, $120 million contract. You're hoping that he can show what he did with the Rams, winning a Super Bowl with them. He looked really good in my opinion for the Rams. He's looked great on the Broncos, but getting up there in age maybe a little bit, 33 years old. But you saw he really hasn't lost much, if at all, with the Rams. You saw him and Aaron Donald be a great 1-2 complement. So him as your number one pass rusher, you're not going to be too upset at that. And they paid him, as such. They're excited to have Von
Yep.
Miller in the building, and There's plenty of other guys, but anything to add on Von Miller and his abilities to get after the quarterback?
Um, Not much on his abilities, but I will kind of go into that. You did mention his age and how he's 33 years old. Yeah, some people may say that's a bad sign for the Bills just because of his age. But honestly, just his experience that he brings to this young defense that they have, like as Greg Russo showing him like kind of his experience and AJ Epinenza showing them just like they're both young pass rushers. Von Miller has those tools in his toolbox. You know what I mean? Like he has the techniques that you need as a pass rusher, and he can show these young bucks kind of how they do it and how they could be successful against some of the vets in the league against like the O line. So I just really think that Von Miller couldn't have been kind of like a better signing for the Buffalo Bills just because he just brings so much to the table when it comes to just experience.
Yeah, I definitely think the Bills would benefit. Their entire defensive line outside of, Von Miller is a pretty young unit, like you said. So these guys definitely are going to benefit from him, even just at practice, coaching them up. Also in games, letting them know what their assignments are, letting them know, okay, this guy's blocking like this, try a stunt here, something like he's like basically having another coach on the field, as well as him having such, a good pass rushing ability. So. Von Miller
Yeah.
is more valuable than I think he's getting credit for, and 6 years is a long time, obviously, for a 33-year-old pass rusher. But the Bills are trying to win, and they're going to make whatever signings they need to get them that Super Bowl. And while Josh Allen's still in the building, while you have Diggs, all these guys on offense, you want to try to get that defense to complement that. And Von Miller is definitely going to be a guy that can really help with that. So
Yeah.
we'll jump into some of the other defensive linemen. You mentioned Greg Rousseau, first round pick, rookie coming in, and he didn't necessarily see a ton of playing time this past season. Didn't see a ton of, production as well,
Yeah.
but he showed flashes and he showed why he was a first round pick. Maybe you're hoping for more in your first year, your first round pick, but he's a young guy. He's still only 22 years old, so I think, like you said, with Von Miller coming in, he can definitely improve. And the sky's the limit for a guy like Greg Rousseau, super athletic. He had 4 sacks in his first season. You're not gonna shun that away. So I think having him, you got a guy like Shaq Lawson, who I think really goes under the radar as a very serviceable starting edge rusher. Um, and I think he's bounced around to a couple different teams, but I think he gives you a little bit more of like kind of that Von Miller veteran presence. He's 28 years old, getting into his prime right now, and he can be another guy can help guys like Greg Rousseau and these younger guys um, get to their best capabilities. Another guy, AJ Epinesa, I'd like to mention, second round pick just in 2020, only 23 years old as well, coming off the edge. So you're looking for guys like him and Greg Rousseau to really improve on what they've shown. And I think with the additions of Shaq Lawson and Von Miller, they're kind of hinting at, hey, we want some guys to, be the teammate but coach aspect as well.
Yeah. And I would just like to point out, they got a kind of like a beefed up D line. I mean, like Greg Rousseau coming in at 6'6", 266. You're not really looking at him to be like the fastest type of guy. You're kind of looking at him to just set your edge and just keep everything contained. And just like coming over to Shaq Lawson as well. I mean, like 265 on the other side. I mean, you're not really looking these guys to like use their speed as their advantage. They're kind of here just to contain everything and push it all up the middle to these linebackers
Yeah, and
and also to their strong like like defensive tackles with Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones. I mean, I'll let Mike get into more of that, but
yeah, we'll get
I
into
mean,
that in just a second. But I think what you said was great. How Greg Rousseau and Shaq Lawson are more of these like beefy power rushers on the edge, and then you have Von Miller, who's more of that speed guy, finesse guy, has those great pass rushing moves to get off the edge. And I think they'll really complement each other really well to just get after the quarterback in general. So like you said, those big guys on the edge are going to be valuable to have with if Von Miller maybe isn't the best in the run as he gets up in age, these bigger guys on the edge can really take over on those early downs, like first and second down when you're thinking the other team's running. Maybe you don't want a guy like Von Miller in the game when he gets up in age. So I think having these bigger guys that Von Miller can coach from the sideline or even coach from the field with them, I think they'll end up turning out really well. So you did mention the defensive tackles, and definitely I think you really have to focus in on Ed Oliver here at defensive tackle. First round pick in 2019, the number 9 overall pick, only 24 years old. And I think last year, I won't call it his breakout, but you really saw more of what you wanted to see from Ed Oliver in his rookie year. And I think he's really a strong piece on that defensive line. I think he's basically, in my opinion, your number 2 guy behind Von Miller, um, just from the interior. Now, I'm not calling him an Aaron Donald, but him and Aaron Donald are similar build, shorter, like 6'1", smaller defensive tackles, but are just unbelievably strong anyways, and are able to get underneath these offensive linemen. And I think with maybe Von Miller having that experience playing with Aaron Donald, maybe he can give him some tips and tricks. Now, I'm not saying Ed Oliver is going to be Aaron Donald. I don't think anybody's really capable of being Aaron Donald besides him. So I won't try to convince anybody that Ed Oliver is the next Aaron Donald, but I think you can get, you know, a fraction of what Aaron Donald is. If you can get that out of Ed Oliver, you're happy. So Ed Oliver's a great piece to have on that defensive line. Daquan Jones, 30-year-old, basically your like nose tackle, your run defender, 6'4", 320 pounds. He's there to defend the run more than get after the passer, more like an Ed Oliver. So they'll be able to complement each other as well. Ed Oliver maybe switching out on the earlier downs, like I was saying with the edge guys, Daquan Jones being that defensive tackle, that nose tackle on the earlier downs.
Yeah, I think you couldn't have said that any better.
Yeah, and the depth on the defensive line, you have guys like Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips have kind of been in the league for a couple of years now, maybe bounced around a little bit, aren't necessarily, starting caliber guys, but serviceable backups. You're not going to be sad with either one of them coming in the game, and they're both, able to give, Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones the breaks that they need, have them rotate in and out, depending on obviously matchups, depending on fatigue, all that type of stuff. All right, let's jump into the linebacker group. And I mean, Von Miller, you could call him a linebacker. He's an edge rusher. He's a pass rusher. He's not going to be in coverage very often, if at all. He's getting paid $120 million to rush after the passer. So now we'll get into the more of the, off-ball linebackers, the coverage linebackers, headlined by Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, who, in my opinion, are one of the best linebacker duos in the entire NFL. Matt Milano, out of Boston College, a fifth round pick that kind of came out of nowhere early on in his career. I believe he's made the Pro Bowl a couple times now. Um, really solid in pass coverage and run defense. But he's kind of your pass coverage specialist. He's basically like almost having another DB on the field, only 6 feet tall, but he uses his what he's got to cover those tight ends over the middle, and but uses his speed as well to keep up with receivers as well. So I think Matt Milano is really your coverage guy, or you look at Tremaine Edmonds, 6'5", 250. He's more of your like run defending type of middle linebacker. So you have two guys, like I've said multiple times with this Bills defense, they got guys that can complement each other. So defensive line, you have guys that can
Yeah,
complement each other. Also the linebacking core, you got one guy who can thump, who can fill holes, who can defend the run really well, and you got that Matt Milano, who's more of that pass coverage guy. And Tremaine Edmonds, it feels like he's been in the league for 10 years and he's 24 years old. So he's still got plenty of time ahead of him. He's unbelievable middle linebacker. He's got the speed to keep up with these tight ends. And I'm not trying to say that he's any slouch in coverage. He can cover a tight end. He can cover a receiver over the middle. Matt Milano is just more of your specialist in that aspect. And they both know their roles and they do them really well. And you won't really find much of a better linebacking duo in the league besides maybe I'd say the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Levante David and Devin White.
yeah, yeah. So kind of touching on what you were saying, I'd honestly compare them to like a yin and a yang. You know what I mean? Like they both like how you're saying they both have different specialists. They both know their role. And like I was just touching on like how you were mentioning how Tremaine Edmonds is 6'5", 250. He is that big type of guy. He's that guy that will match up and go head up with Derrick Henry. He's that guy that will meet you in the hole. Is basically what I'm trying to get at. And Matt Milano is that guy that you could stick on that in that pass coverage. He does specialize in pass coverage, and I mean, yeah, he just knows his role. I mean, that's no slouch in saying that he's not gonna go into the hole and meet you in the hole, but I mean, his specialty is basically just getting pass coverage, defending your guys.
Yeah, both of these guys unbelievable in all facets of being a linebacker in the NFL, but they have their specialties that they can really um, use together in tandem and dominate the NFL. So we'll jump into the defensive backs now. I guess we'll start with the cornerbacks. And obviously headlined by Tre'Davious White, who's off the torn ACL. You're hoping to see, what you what you're used to in Tre'Davious White, and with modern day doctors and medicine, a torn ACL is like a broken ankle, a twisted ankle. These guys are coming back, and you saw a guy like Nick Bosa last year had a torn ACL, came back and was, exactly what you thought he was going to be. So I think there's no reason to really think a Tre'Davious White type isn't going to get back to his full potential, his full, capabilities. So Tre'Davious White, in my opinion, a top five corner in the NFL. He's going to shut down any team's number one receiver. Great in zone, great in man, great in press. There's no weaknesses in his game at all, in my opinion. And I think the Bills are going into every week telling him, if you got Devontae Adams one week, he's on Devontae Adams. You got, DeAndre Hopkins, he's going to take the other team's
No
number
one
one
wide receiver
receiver,
out the game.
take him out of the game. Yeah, exactly. So
Yep.
Tre'Davious White, obviously, not a ton needs to be said about him besides that torn ACL. Hopefully, he's able to come back to what we remember him as. But at that number two spot, a rookie corner, Khair Alam, I believe I'm saying that correctly.
Yep.
Um, First round draft pick this year out of Florida, number 23 overall pick. You're hoping to get that complement to Tre'Davious White, like we've been talking about with all the other positions. You're hoping that he can be that complement to the guy on the other side. So, I know you got a little bit more on Khair Alam. If you want to, give us a little bit more insight on
Yeah.
what he's all about.
Yeah. The Bills are kind of looking at him to like replace their guy that they lost, Levi Wallace, in free agency. But yeah, you kind of summed it up perfectly. They kind of want him to come and complement Tre'Davious White. I mean, him being 6'1", he has great speed. I just think that him and Tre'Davious White honestly could be a nice lockdown duo in the NFL. And I mean, him being so young, obviously, like how you're mentioning, he is a rookie coming in, starting at like he's been the second overall corner on their team. I do see him. He obviously has a really high ceiling. I think the Bills truly do believe in him because obviously, if they didn't, they wouldn't have drafted him. But I think that he could be a future corner for the Bills for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think the aspect of having Tre'Davious White as your teammate too there, kind of like with the Von Miller stuff where he's able to teach his teammates. I think Tre'Davious White's shown that he's able to be that number one shutdown corner, and if they can work together to both get to that level, that'd be, amazing. You don't see a lot of teams with
Yeah,
two really, really good starting cornerbacks, so I think that's just invaluable. You can't even imagine it on most teams. So I think Khair Alam has all the potential to get to that, and we'll see how it plays out. I mean, he's going to be probably starting week one on the other side of Tre'Davious, so we'll be able to see nice and early how he's coming out the gate.
yeah,
So the rest of the cornerback room, not necessarily as much to talk about. I mean, Teron Johnson's been pretty solid in his career. Um, whether he's coming in the slot, whether he's playing outside. Um, he had an interception last year. He's maybe not going to play as much as um, these guys, Kair Elam and Tre'Davious White, but when he comes in, he's going to play solid. Saron Neal, Dane Jackson, Cam Lewis, just to name a few. I mean, these guys, they have a pretty solid cornerback room outside of their top two, but the top two are really who you're looking at to, take over
yeah.
the game on that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
All right.
I, w-
And
yeah, I agree with that.
to finish off the defense, we'll jump into the safeties. And this is, in my opinion, the top safety duo in the NFL. with Jordan Poyer
Yeah.
and Micah Hyde. They've been doing it for, God, it feels like, 10 plus years now. The two of them have been together, but both of these guys, there's not a lot that needs to be said about them. They're both really, really solid top tier safeties. They both made the All Pro team last year. Jordan Poyer made first team All Pro. Micah Hyde made second team All Pro. And these guys, I'll say it again. I mean, I feel like I've said it 80 times this episode, but they really know how to complement each other. Um, just they seem like they know what they're both thinking without even needing to communicate. These guys are great at getting everybody set before, the snap and making sure everybody knows what their responsibilities are and then really doing what they're responsible for at a high level. So I think, not a lot needs to be said about Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde other than, in my opinion, the top safety duo in the league. These guys are unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like the Bills do just such a damn good job at just really building a solid defense because they really know how to get people who complement each other. But yeah, like you were saying, Micah Hyde is that guy that he's a very good coverage. You were saying they do very good at doing their job. Micah Hyde's an amazing coverage guy, and Jordan Poyer kind of just like he just what he brings to the table. He's able to just do it all kind of. So I mean, 2021, 5 interceptions. I mean, that's pretty good. That's what you're kind of looking at for your safety.
Yeah, both of these guys with 5 interceptions this past season. So, um, unbelievable in coverage. Maybe not like you're the best run defending safeties in the league, but these guys get it done. They're really there to cover the back end. Nothing goes over the top, but they can also jump, those short routes depending on what zones or if they're in man on tight ends. They can do it all. So there's really not a lot else to say. I mean, I'm just
Yeah, I mean, in a conference in the AFC where I mean it is mainly air raid. I mean, like people are throwing the ball. I mean, you're not really looking for your guys. I mean, you are looking for your guys to fill your holes for like your guys like Derrick Henry, but you're also looking for your guys to be able to cover like Tyreek Hill and much more. I mean, you're just looking for those guys that are able to cover downfield, and that's why Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer can just kind of get it done. That's why the Bills are so
exactly.
successful. Yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, wrapping up the defense, I think it's an unbelievably strong unit on the defensive side of the ball. You're really top down. I mean, maybe without the addition of Von Miller, you would have been a little bit iffy on that defensive line, but I think they'll have no trouble getting after the passer. Those linebackers are obviously great. We talked about how they can defend the run, defend the pass, whatever you need. And then obviously those DBs making all pros and Pro Bowls, all that stuff. These guys are unbelievable. So, defense as a whole, in my opinion, is top tier.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And we'll graze over the special teams here. I mean, Tyler Bass is probably one of the better kickers um,
Yeah, I
in the
mean,
in the league today. I
yeah.
mean, his longest last year was 57 yards. He had an 87.5 field goal percentage. I mean, you're not going to complain at that. He's a young guy too, so there's room for improvement. Only 25 years old, so I think you're happy with Tyler Bass. And they bring in the rookie punt god, um, Matt Araiza. Areza? I think it's Areza. Out of San
Yeah.
Diego State, nicknamed the Punt God for having absolute booming punts in college. So we'll see how he does there on the back end, punting the ball away. But Tyler Bass is that guy that you know what you're getting. We've seen him for um, a little bit now, showing that he's capable of being a quality kicker. I mean, you're not your team isn't going to be make or break by your kicker, obviously, or your punter, but these guys are able to get it done, and we'll see how the punt god turns out. But Tyler Bass is a great kicker to have on your team to complement the rest of this absolutely stacked team.
Yeah, and I'll kind of touch on the punt returner and the kick returner, Isaiah McKenzie. Kind of talked about him when we were going over the wide receiver room earlier in the episode. But yeah, I mean, he's a phenomenal speed guy. I mean, when you get the ball in his hand, obviously, he's just able to make it happen. I think he had a couple punt returns or a couple kick returns this last season. I mean, that's just like you're hoping for at least one a season, but I mean, like he's able to get it done. That's all you're asking for out of your kick returner.
Yeah, I think that just about wraps it up. I think as a whole, me and you are both very high on the Buffalo Bills for this upcoming 2022 NFL season. I'm thinking playoffs. I'm thinking there's no reason that this isn't a team competing for a Super Bowl. Obviously, the AFC is unbelievably loaded right now, with plenty of new additions in the AFC West, quarterbacks galore. You got the Bengals just went to the Super Bowl. You got the Dolphins in your own division picking up Tyreek Hill. there's plenty of teams in the AFC that are going to be competing, but I don't see how the Bills aren't right up there at the top with all of them. You look at this roster top down, top to bottom. It's just, it's a Super Bowl capable roster. So I think anything else you want to touch on with the Bills and their outlook for the 2022 season?
I think they're gonna do what the I don't see them falling off from last year. I do see them coming back, and I'm just curious how their offensive coordinator, their new addition to their offensive coordinator, is really gonna see if it's gonna step up their game, really push them over the edge, and really hopefully let them win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, obviously, for the Buffalo Bills, and only time will tell. We'll see how that goes, but yeah, I think we'll wrap it up here. This was the Buffalo Bills segment. I guess we'll jump into another team now. We'll probably go Miami Dolphins next, but we're gonna take a quick break. Um, so yeah, stick with us, and we'll be right back here on the Underground Football Podcast.
Hey guys, I'm your co-host Priller. Go check us out on TikTok at UFPod, where we post updates on the latest news in the NFL and where we post original creative content daily. Thanks for listening to this short ad. Now let's get back to talking football.
Welcome back to the Underground Football Podcast. Now we're gonna hop into our Miami Dolphins 2022 season preview. Um, Obviously, the Miami Dolphins last year went 9-8. Were not able to make the playoffs, just missed, came really close. Looking to bounce back from that and see if they can end up making the playoffs, make a run this year. You never know. They made a bunch of moves this offseason that we'll get into. Um, yeah, let's just jump right into it, I guess. We'll jump into the quarterbacks to start, as usual. Quarterback room has mainly two guys that you're looking at to compete. A lot of rooms only have one guy, so this is a little bit interesting here. I think I'm a little bit more leaning towards a two quarterback room than most people are, but we'll jump right into it. So obviously Tua Tagovailoa is your starting quarterback week one, I guess, and we'll see how that goes. And I think a lot of people are saying that you got to trust in Tua and all this stuff, but I don't know how much I trust in him, and he's shown that he can be pretty inconsistent and not really be able to show off any extraordinary athletic ability and not really win his team many football games. So, 2020 first round pick, obviously super highly touted prospect. They had the whole hashtag tank for Tua going, and he hasn't really panned out as of yet, but we'll see how he turns out. And then his backup, who I'm thinking might get some playing time, some more playing time than a lot of people think, is none other than Teddy Bridgewater. So we'll see how it goes, but I think the two of them are similar quarterbacks in a lot of ways. They have a lot of the similar or a lot of similar athletic capabilities, and I think they'll both get playing time throughout this season. So, any thoughts, Priller, on these two quarterbacks?
No, honestly, I 100% agree with you on that. I do think that this is going to be more of kind of just like a feel your way out type of season. I mean, like obviously they're pushing for the playoff position, but I mean Tua, like you're saying, hasn't really shown anything too special. So I do think that Teddy might step in and kind of be like that kind of veteran presence, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. Basically, be that veteran presence and maybe come in and step in when Tua is kind of struggling, obviously. And I mean, who knows how much we're going to see of that? I mean, you never know, Tua could blow up.
Yeah, I think Teddy gives you a little bit more consistency, not necessarily a lot, but um, I'm not trying to say either one of these guys are necessarily top quarterbacks in the NFL. We just talked about Josh Allen, who obviously we raved about and we think very highly of. These are definitely guys on the different side of the spectrum here, and we don't think highly of them. But I think Teddy Bridgewater gives you a little bit more of that consistency aspect. You know what you're gonna get out of him. Where Tua week to week, it's just inconsistent. I mean, I'm using the same words a little bit, but that's kind of bottom line what it is. So I think with the Dolphins kind of being in like a win now type of mentality, I think Teddy Bridgewater may not be, the worst guy to put in there if you're getting consistency over that um, I don't even know what you want to call it, that polarizing type of quarterback in Tua. So I think there's definitely a competition to be had here, more than a lot of people are giving credit for. I mean, the Dolphins, in my opinion, wouldn't have signed Teddy Bridgewater if they didn't have a little bit of worries about Tua. You know, most teams don't sign really good backups unless their starter isn't great. You look around, like Mahomes doesn't have a good backup. Aaron Rodgers, I mean Jordan Love, I guess, but that's a different story. Josh Allen doesn't have a good backup. Like these teams aren't investing in backup quarterbacks if they really really believe in their quarterbacks um, to play well week in and week out. So I think Teddy Bridgewater definitely has a chance to start, but the main guy's
Yeah.
Tua, and Tua just, in my opinion, doesn't have the arm talent of a lot of these other quarterbacks, doesn't have the play extension ability. He's got some speed with his legs, and I just think he's not capable of doing a lot of the things that a lot of these quarterbacks are. And we talked about this a little bit on our previous podcast, which you can talk a little bit more about in a second here. But I'm not nearly as high on Tua as it seems like other people are, and I just think, there's a lot of quarterbacks in the league that can do what Tua does, and he's just not improving his team to the extent that you would like out of your first round, number 5 overall pick.
Yeah. Kind of going off what you said. I mean, I'm not personally as high on Tua either, but I mean, one of our guests that we had on the show, I mean, he's pretty high on Tua. He had him ranked. You just gonna have to go check out the podcast. But kind of talking on Teddy Bridgewater, I mean, from their previous backup they had, Jacoby Brissett. I mean, he's definitely an upgrade. I mean, you wouldn't upgrade your backup. You know what I mean? If you weren't thinking about putting him in. I mean, they put Jacoby Brissett in for like 5 games. Came in, he didn't do much. I mean, 5 TDs for four and through 4 interceptions. I mean, like that's not that good. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater though, playing for Denver last year, came in. I mean, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I'm not a guy that just only looks at TD to interception ratio, but that's still huge factor right there. Just because I mean, you got a huge increase in a solid backup. So I do think that Tua. I mean, as people kind of want to rave on him, yeah, they kind of want to see him play the game. I think Teddy's just gonna be that safety net for the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the nail there. I mean, nothing else that I got to say really. I mean, you brought in a seventh round pick, Skylar Thompson. I don't think he gets any starting time. I think it's a two-man race. It's Tua and Teddy, and I mean, we'll see how that little competition goes, and we'll now get into the rest of the players that they're going to be handing the ball off to, throwing to, and working with on that offensive side of the ball. And so we'll jump right now into the running back room, which we just talked about the Bills and how deep their running back room is, and the extensive amount of depth in that room, and how many guys there are that are borderline starters or starting caliber running backs. And I think with the Miami Dolphins here, you have a very very similar situation. So um, I don't even know how you necessarily want to list these guys. I mean, I'll list it how I see it, and I think if you have a healthy Raheem Mostert, he's probably your number one guy. I mean, I think the only other guy maybe would be Chase Edmonds. So you have Raheem Mostert, you have Chase Edmonds, you have Miles Gaskin, you have Sony Michel. So Miles Gaskin was basically your starter going into 2021, and didn't really get it done for the Dolphins. Only 612 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns out of your starting back. I mean, he wasn't necessarily getting a workhorse amount of carries, but he had the 22nd most carries in the league. I mean, that's a starting running back. So you're hoping for more out of that. When you're 22nd in attempts and 34th in yards, your efficiency isn't great. He's 48th in average yards per carry out of the running backs in the league. So you're hoping for more out of your starting running back. So Miles Gaskin wasn't really it for them. Um, but I think you bring in all of these different guys that are coming from very different situations and have very different skill sets. Now, I said Raheem Mostert would be my number one. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think having in my opinion, the fastest running back in the NFL um, on your team. I mean, that's invaluable. You can't speak to how valuable it is to have a guy who's just faster than everybody else on the field. And I mean, maybe he's now on Tyreek Hill's team, so maybe he's not the fastest guy on the field, but he's the fastest guy on, compared to the other team's defense. So I think Raheem Mostert, his one problem is health issues, but when he plays, he's pretty solid. You saw him in the playoffs in 2019, really backpacking that 49ers team to the Super Bowl. He's capable of being, your workhorse back as long as he stays healthy, which is really his main concern. So um, there's these other guys. Chase Edmonds had a decent year, last year, not really getting the James Conner type of carries, but getting, some type of action. Sony Michel had some action with the Rams as well when Cam Akers went down. So all of these guys are coming from situations where they weren't necessarily the lead back, so they know how to be in this type of committee. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how they all turn out this year and work with the two quarterbacks. But yeah, anything you have to add on these four running backs?
Yeah, definitely. You were touching on Chase Edmonds. Yeah, I mean James Conner really kind of took over that running back room in Arizona, and I think Chase Edmonds kind of got a little pissed off about that. I think he kind of wanted to see more touches into him, so that's why he signed with the Dolphins this year for a 2-year deal. But I think Chase Edmonds is going to be looking. I mean, like on paper, it does look like they're running a nice running back committee with these four like solid, decent running backs. But I think Chase Edmonds is pushing to be that lead back, and I think he might like make a run for it. I think he definitely could step up and be that lead running back, that lead pass catching back out of the backfield for Tua, that safety net.
Yeah, I think they all have different roles. I mean, I think Chase Edmonds is mainly going to be your pass catcher, like you said. I think Raheem Mostert's going to be mainly that outside zone type of guy. You're handing the ball off, and you're hoping he can get to the edge and just outrun people. Um, Now, I guess Sony Michel would be your between the tackles runner. I mean, he's pretty decent at that. But I think I'd also like to mention how most of these guys here, besides maybe Miles Gaskin, are, you know, getting a little bit up in age. Now, I mean, we're talking about running backs, so obviously the average running back age, isn't very high compared to the rest of the positions in the NFL. But um, you look at Chase Edmonds is 26 years old, Sony Michel is 27, and Raheem Mostert is 30. So I don't think necessarily any of these guys are going to be like workhorse backs. I don't think anybody's going to be getting that many carries. Even compared to like a Devin Singletary for the Bills, I think he's capable of getting a lot more carries than these guys. I think with their age and even just their skill sets, these guys aren't, they're on the Dolphins being part of this committee for a reason. They're not really there to be getting a ton of action every game, but they're all going to work together and I think make a pretty decent backfield here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now we'll jump into the wide receiver room here. So you have Tua and Teddy Bridgewater, who, in my opinion, both have some of the weakest arms in the league. Just, pure arm strength, getting the ball down the field and getting the ball in quick. I mean, Tua, I'll give him credit. He can zip the ball in there when he needs to, but I think with the range that Tua and Teddy have, it's really not there. So when you look at these wide receivers, you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who arguably are the two fastest, players in the NFL. Never mind just receivers. And then you're looking at quarterbacks that can't really like get the ball downfield to these guys. On these go balls, on these posts, whatever route concepts you have them on, um, you're looking to take the top off a defense with a guy like Tyreek Hill. You saw him do that in Kansas City. So I think Tyreek Hill is going to play a very different role than he's used to. And I think Jalen Waddle showed with his reception total last year. I think he broke the record for the most receptions by a rookie. I think, that shows that he's getting the ball a lot in that short to intermediate game, and he's going to work with the ball in his hands. And I think the two of them, yeah, on paper, it looks like they might have a down year. Like, or I guess Tyreek Hill, looking at that, um, from going from Tua, or from Mahomes to Tua, excuse me. But I think when you look at the role he's going to play, it's still going to get him the ball a ton. I think he's going to get more receptions overall than he was getting in Kansas City, just because he's going to be working underneath, getting the ball in his hands, and letting him, work with that, run after catch. And I think Tyreek Hill's really underrated. He's one of the best receivers with the ball in his hands to get, those missed tackles. We've seen him return a couple punts and kicks, and he's deadly back there. Obviously, he's probably the fastest guy in the league, but he's great at avoiding tackles, and I think he'll do pretty well in this role, even with the downgrade from quarterbacks.
Yeah. I would I would I would kind of agree on that. I mean, once you drop off that steep cliff from going from Mahomes to Tua, I do think that you're going to drop off. You're going to see a decent amount of drop off in just like stats wise with Tyreek Hill, but I do think his role will change. I think we'll see more of a Tyreek Hill that wants to get the ball in his hands rather than like blow the top off a defense and show everyone how fast he is. So I think that they might be looking to get him in like more like how the Chiefs kind of use him on these little motion routes, kind of get him moving. Like so he's already got this the speed built up with him. And that when he gets the ball, then he has this acceleration that he can just take off and just go and just do what he does with the ball. But I mean, kind of touching in on Jalen Waddle a little bit. I mean, like, yeah, he was a rookie sensation last year. As you mentioned, he did break, I think he did break that record for the most reception as a rookie. Um, I do see him with adding such an elite receiver in Tyreek Hill. I mean, I don't know where you kind of put him. Receivers are kind of touchy subject in the NFL, but top five, top 10 wide receiver adding Tyreek Hill on there, you're obviously going to see a little bit of decrease because Tyreek Hill is going to want his touches, man, every game. And so Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, while they both are absolute like speed freaks and they can obviously move, they're going to be both demanding the ball. And I mean, it's going to be kind of interesting seeing how this plays out with Tua being their quarterback and seeing how he's going to be able to dish the rock out to these people.
Yeah, and you touched on how Tyreek Hill is going to want the ball. You know, the Dolphins want to get him the ball. With the trade that they gave to the Chiefs, we didn't really touch on it yet, but Miami Dolphins did end up trading during this offseason 5 picks for Tyreek Hill, including their first rounder and second rounder of this year. So they think very, very highly of Tyreek Hill, and then they paid him like they think highly of him, obviously, as well, giving him 4 years and $120 million, with 72 million of that guaranteed. They want Tyreek Hill to get the ball. They believe in Tyreek Hill, and there's just been no reason to think otherwise. But like you said, it's gonna be interesting how each one of them can get the ball and play their roles when they're similar wide receivers, in my opinion. I mean, Jalen Waddle has been, playing with Tua this past year, so he's a little bit more used to it. But we'll see how Tyreek Hill can kind of acclimate himself into that very, very different offense. But I think I touched on Isaiah McKenzie with the Bills earlier, but I think you could see these guys in kind of like a Deebo Samuel type of role, maybe getting the ball to them in the backfield or something like that, because both of these guys, like I said with Tyreek, are very, very good after the catch or just with the ball in their hands. So, the Dolphins brought in Mike McDaniel from the San Francisco 49ers, where Kyle Shanahan loves to do that Deebo Samuel stuff. That you bring in Mike McDaniel to be your head coach. I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of offense he implements here, with all these weapons that he has. I mean, we're only at the top two receivers right now. This receiving room goes fairly deep here, so I think it'll be very interesting to see what they're capable of doing with all these different weapons and the speed, the pure speed that they have with this wide receiver and even running back group is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, just how you mentioned their head coach, Mike McDaniels, right? Am I getting that wrong?
Yep, that's good. Yep.
Um, yeah, I mean, he just kind of like he is that creative mind. I mean, he I think he'll bring something to the Dolphins that is what they've been missing this past year. I think though he's gonna really tie it all together. And how you're mentioning the speed, like you were mentioning, fastest running back. I mean, Tyreek Hill's one of the fastest people in the world. Jalen Waddle, like one of the fastest receivers in the NFL. Mike Gesicki's not. We haven't even mentioned him yet, but he's a pretty fast tight end. They got the speed to get it done, man. I think that's what they're kind of building themselves out. They're trying to beat you laterally on the football field. They're not going to be the guys that are going to pound it down your throat. They're going to be the guys that are going to be able to run side to side, basically make you miss. They're going to be the guys that stretch the whole football field. So it's going to be really interesting seeing how uh, Mike McDaniel's really puts his spin on things and how he's going to really have a creative mind when it comes to running the offense.
Yep. I definitely think it'll be a sight to see. I mean, Tyreek Hill is going to have a big role. He is with the draft capital they gave up and the money they're paying him. So, Tyreek Hill is going to get his receptions, get his targets, and I think he'll be good in fantasy and all that stuff still, even with Tua. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they make that happen. So I'd like to touch on a little bit of the rest of the receiving group. I think Cedric Wilson we haven't touched on is a very underrated receiver in my opinion. He was kind of stuffed down below all those guys on the Cowboys depth chart. He had Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, all these amazing receivers above him on that depth chart. And he still put up 602 yards and 6 touchdowns this past season. But Cedric Wilson he's an underrated guy for these Dolphins here to be a third receiver. He's a good third receiver, especially to complement um, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, he's going to be a great complement to them, having a little bit more size at 6'2". Your Tyreek Hills and Jalen Waddles are both below 6 feet, so I think he'll be able to complement them pretty well. And the rest of the room, you got Mohamed Sanu, veteran presence, great run blocker. Um, and a bunch of guys that maybe have bounced around a little bit. Lynn Bowden Jr. has been a little bit interesting for the Dolphins. Trent Sherfield's bounced around. Preston Williams, a little bit of an athletic freak that hasn't really gotten to his pure or his capabilities. But yeah, this wide receiver room is it's top heavy, but I think Cedric Wilson's a great third piece, and the rest of these guys aren't anything to discredit.
Yeah, just kind of touching on some of his receivers. I mean, I won't go too much on Cedric Wilson. I mean, he is a very underrated piece. We haven't really got to see him much on the Cowboys, but I mean, it will be interesting seeing him come in as a probably the third wide receiver of this team. Just really seeing how he'll do. But like, I mean, I'm kind of interested to hear your take again on like Mohamed Sanu. It's like Sanu. Like, what do you think they're really going to use him as? Just kind of like a run blocker, kind of as a veteran presence. Like, what do you really think that they're going to use him for?
I think we've seen him the past couple years. He's been with the 49ers. He's been with the Falcons. I think he was with the Lions for a little bit as well. He's bounced around, and you never really see him taking on too big of a role as like a pass catcher. But he comes in, like I said, and like you said, he's a great run blocker as a wide receiver, and he's just a great guy to have in the locker room. He's been around guys like Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. He knows, what it takes to be a top receiver himself. I mean, he was pretty good back in his heyday. I mean, he's getting up there in age now, but I think to be a mentor, and he has that connection with Mike McDaniel and the 49ers, I think he'll be able to help these guys with this brand new offense that they're going to be running. So I think Mohamed Sanu might not have the biggest impact on the stat sheet, but I think he'll definitely have an effect on these players in a positive way.
It's good.
Um, all right, we'll now jump into the tight end room, which in my opinion, when you look at Mike Gesicki, he's really a wide receiver. He's really just another wide receiver because he lines up outside more than he lines up, on the line of scrimmage as a tight end. He doesn't put his hand in the dirt usually. He's not really run blocking. He's basically a wide receiver. They list him as a tight end. He's basically just a tall wide receiver. So Mike Gesicki's obviously a great talent to have. He's gonna really complement Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle well with his size being 6'6". Um, a great sure-handed target for guys like Tua and Teddy Bridgewater. Um, you'd like to see him get a little bit more of the touchdown upside with his size, be that red zone target. But I think Mike Gesicki is a top tight end in the league. I mean, if you can call him a tight end, I genuinely believe I don't think he should be considered a tight end. Um, but I mean, I'm not gonna complain. I'm not gonna get mad at anybody calling him tight end. He's 6'6", but I think he's basically just having another wide receiver that just has a different set of or a different skill set. He's more of that sure-handed guy that isn't necessarily going to be running vertically or horizontally like super fast, but he's going to be that guy that can, get open, sit in a zone, and catch the ball consistently every time. So Mike Gesicki is a great complement to these guys, and the rest of the tight end room isn't really that strong. You have Durham Smythe, Adam Shaheen, and Hunter Long. None of them probably are going to see too much reception upside. Maybe in the run game they'll be good compliments, but yeah, I think Mike Gesicki's your guy when you're looking at the next pass catcher for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it. You kind of hit it right on the head. Being 6'6", he has the size to be a tight end. But like, yeah, as you were saying, he doesn't really line up as a tight end. Like having that size, I mean, it really sucks to see this guy with so much size not having that red zone threat that you want in a guy like a tight end, like a tall tight end. You want that red zone threat. He's not being that red zone threat. I have a feeling that he'll be more of that guy. He'll be more of that red zone threat. I mean, he is kind of like your guy. He does get targeted quite a bit. I mean, just looking at his previous stats last season, 2 games out of out of the 17. I mean, or out of the 17. I mean, he had 11 targets one game and 12 targets. I mean, that like unless they were just leaving him wide open. I mean, he's getting open. He's getting separation. He's getting targeted by Tua. coming back to the same team, obviously with Tua being his quarterback. He's been in this what's the word I'm looking for? He's been in this franchise basically with Tua as his QB. So he obviously knows what Tua brings to the table and how Tua's going to get him the ball. So I see Mike Gesicki maybe having a little bit of a better season with the touchdown upside. But I mean, reception wise, with adding Tyreek Hill and adding Cedric Wilson, his receptions may go down, but I think that he may see an increase in the red zone. So being that kind of fitting more of that tight end role and being more of a red zone threat.
Yeah, and I think he's definitely your guy. Third and short, if you're going for it on fourth down and short and you're passing the ball, you're looking for Mike Gesicki. He's going to be that guy that can get open, nice, short, quick, intermediate routes, and get his hands on the ball and bring it down. He's going to be your sure-handed guy for this team that has a lot of deep threats and speedsters. He's going to be that complement to that. Um,
Yeah.
all right, we'll jump into the offensive line now, which, in previous years has been very lackluster to say the least. Now, the big addition is Teron Armstead. He's going to bring a great left tackle to your team. You gave him 5 years, $75 million. You're paying him like he's, a top left tackle, which he is. So this guy's gonna come in. He's a little bit up there in age. He's 31 years old. That's not terrible for a tackle. I mean, we saw Andrew Whitworth play until he's 40
40.
something. But yeah, I think Teron Armstead hasn't really lost a step. He's a quick tackle too, which I think will help in this Mike McDaniel offense. I think he'll be able to, get to that second level, help in the run game, because if Mike McDaniel's running anything like the 49ers offense, got to be a lot of run plays and play actions off the run game, booting around, and having Teron Armstead to get to that second level in the run game, that outside zone scheme will be valuable. If he's got a guy like Raheem Mostert running behind him, he's going to need to get to that second level, get to that linebacker. So Teron Armstead, one of the top left tackles in the league. You love having him. The rest of the offensive line, not necessarily, you know, great. You have Lee and Eichenberg at left guard. Center, you have Connor Williams. You have Robert Hunt playing right guard, and you have Austin Jackson playing right tackle. None of these guys are like unbelievably bad, but you're not really looking at any of the rest of the players on this offensive line unit and being wowed by any of them. So, I mean, you saw Tua and Jacoby Brissett getting sacked a decent amount last year, but you're hoping with Teron Armstead and the level of difference in this offense, where they're going to be doing a lot of play action, it might help Tua or Teddy Bridgewater stay a little bit more protected in the pocket when they won't have to block as much in just shotgun or pistol sets that are just passing formations.
Yeah, I think Teron Armstead, you mentioned him being quick. That will really help Mike McDaniels. I think be that creative mind that he is, really like extend run plays to the sidelines. I think he's going to use that speed that they got on those edges and really push it to the limit and see what they can do with it. But yeah, as you were mentioning, I just want to. I'm kind of being the stat guy of this podcast, but just kind of like bringing up some of the stats from last year. Jacoby Brissett and Tua got sacked like 40 times last season. So I mean, hopefully with bringing an elite left tackle like Teron Armstead in, will kind of be that glue that the Dolphins O line has been looking for. Kind of bring that group together and make them be a more solid unit. Maybe bring that sack number down like Tua would like, so you can keep your quote unquote franchise QB Tua healthy, so he can play all the games this year and maybe explode.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the that Kyle Shanahan-esque offense where they're getting Tua out of the pocket or Teddy Bridgewater out of the pocket, letting him roll out off a play action. I think that'll also help with limiting the sack numbers as well. So this offensive line group isn't necessarily something to be super, you know, flashed by. You're not going to be wowed by this offensive line group, but I think Teron Armstead is super, super solid, and the rest of these guys are going to be serviceable enough to get the job done, get the ball to these guys, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, all these weapons that they have in that short to intermediate game, which is where Tua thrives anyways. You're not trying to get super, super vertical anyways. So I think offense as
Yeah.
a whole, it'll be really interesting to see again how Tyreek Hill is used. But I think they'll find a way to get him involved, and I think this will be a pretty good offensive unit here with the Miami Dolphins. Maybe not at the level of the Bills, just because of pure quarterback play. I think most offenses you need a pretty solid quarterback to have a top tier offense. But I think Tua and Teddy can get the job done and get these weapons the ball enough to where this offense is you know top half of the league.
Yeah, I think the best way to describe this offense is only time will tell. We'll really see how halfway through the season, or when the season's complete, just fully looking back on the season, we'll really see if this was really the right move to really go all out, grab Tyreek Hill and grab Teron Armstead. We'll really see is like I said, only time will tell to see if this offense will be as great as on paper as we think it will be.
Yeah, and I think the Dolphins believe it. Making that trade for Tyreek Hill, you got to look around the rest of the AFC. A lot of these teams are making moves, so the Dolphins think they're able to compete with them, and like you said, only time will tell. Um, so moving on from the offense, we'll hop into the defensive unit right now. We'll see on the other side of the ball how the Dolphins stack up. We'll hop in with the defensive line, which we talked a little bit before the show. The defensive line, none of these names really pop off the screen. None of these names are really people that are super, super memorable or even are just superstars. But you have your guys like Christian Wilkins is a great run defender and can also get after the passer a little bit. Raekwon Davis as more of your nose tackle. Um, you know, Collecting all the blockers and defending the run really well at 6'7", 330 pounds. He's going to be your guy just absorbing all the blocks and letting your linebackers fill holes and your other defensive linemen get there. So I think those two guys on the interior. Um, you have Emmanuel Ogba on the defensive
Yeah,
line. Had 9 sacks last year.
very
Pretty
successful
solid, yeah.
season. Yeah,
Um, you have Andrew Van Ginkel coming off the edge. He's more of that tweener type, like a Bill Belichick type of, he can drop into coverage, but he can also rush after the passer. Think like Kyle Van Noy or Jamie Collins, guys like Donta Hightower, like all these kind of in between guys that are able to get after the passer, but also get back into coverage. You have Melvin Ingram coming off the edge. So I think, overall, I'd also like to touch on Jalen Phillips, who was a first round pick last year as well as Jalen Waddle. Jalen Phillips getting picked 18th out of University of Miami. You didn't see a ton out of him this past season. I mean, he had the sack numbers, but it was really just schemed up for him by that Brian Flores defense. So 8.5 sacks, on paper looks super good, but I think the pressure numbers just weren't really there what you're expecting out of him, and he's not necessarily a great run defender. So he's going to be more of that guy that comes in on those pass rushing specialty downs, and we'll see how the defense plays without Brian Flores. I think Brian Flores was a big loss for this defense. Now I think the offense with Mike McDaniel is going to be great, but I do think this defense is going to miss Brian Flores. I think he was a great head coach. Um, so we'll see how Jalen Phillips does, but as your first round pick of last year, you're hoping he can definitely, become that superstar that you drafted him to be. And he's got the athletic capability, he's got the speed off the edge to be that guy.
yeah, for sure. And just like kind of going back how we were talking about Von Miller being that veteran presence on the Bills, I think Melvin Ingram kind of fills that role where I mean he kind of can bring that experience. I mean he used to be kind of like a productive pass rusher. I mean last season didn't see much, but I still think that old age, that veteranness, I think it just will help bring such like people like Jalen Phillips the technique that they need. Add more. It never hurts to add a little bit more tools in your toolbox when you're a pass rusher. So I think just getting the work in from Melvin Ingram, I think that connection that they can build will help them be successful as a defense and help them be successful as a defensive line.
Yeah, for sure. I think this offense or this defensive line, is capable of getting after the passer. They showed it last year having a guy like Jalen Phillips who maybe didn't have the year that you're hoping. He still had 8.5 sacks. So they're capable of getting pressure there, and we'll see how good they are against the run. But with your guys up front, Raekwon Davis and Christian Wilkins, you're pretty happy with your run defense there. Um, so I guess we'll jump into the linebacker unit right now. We have your main two guys are going to be Landon Roberts and Jerome Baker. Landon Roberts more of that run defender type. Again, more of like a Bill Belichick guy, can kind of rush the passer a little bit, kind of cover the middle. More of that run defender type though. And Jerome Baker is kind of going to be your speedster over the middle that can match up with a tight end and go vertical with him, or a receiver's coming over on a drag, you can pick him up and fly with him to the sideline. He's also, in the run game, going to be great sideline to sideline. So Jerome Baker is going to be your main guy at the middle linebacker spot, but Landon Roberts is a good complement to him as well.
Yeah, I kind of look as I was like we were talking about before the podcast. Kind of look as Jerome Baker as like their field general. I mean, he kind of runs it down there in the middle of the field. But yeah, I mean, they do complement themselves. I feel like that's just kind of what head coach has been trying to do. Just get someone to build off of each other. Kind of have somebody that can do one thing, the other person that does the other, and they kind of just like are that yin and yang. They kind of just like complement each other perfectly. I think that's what we're seeing here with Jerome Baker and Landon Roberts.
Yeah, and it's weird. I feel like I'm having deja vu. I feel like we're talking about similar guys to the Buffalo Bills here. Now, in my opinion, Jerome Baker and Landon Roberts are, you know, the budget version of Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. I think Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano are both way better at what they do than these two guys, but I think these guys get the job done, and they're perfectly capable of leading a strong defense in the run game and pass game as the middle line of defense.
Yeah, you ready to jump into the cornerbacks?
Yeah, we can jump into corners now, and I think they're really led by their top two guys, Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. Xavier Howard, the big name, he's made
Yep.
plenty of All Pros. I think he made the Pro Bowl last year. Um, But, Xavier Howard, one of the top corners in the NFL, you're really, really happy with having him on your team. 5 interceptions last year, 16 passes defended. This guy is a ball hawk. He can get the ball in his
Yeah.
hands, but he can also lock down a receiver too. He's not necessarily only going for interceptions. He's able to lock down number one receivers on any team. And I think he's very similar to a guy like Tre'Davious White that we just talked about in the previous, first part of this podcast. So I think having him and then having Byron Jones, who's kind of just your do-it-all, like he's a jack of all trades, maybe like master of none. He's not necessarily great at any one specific thing, but Byron Jones is your ideal corner number two, if that makes sense. You go into a year having Byron Jones be your number two corner, you're super, super happy with that. So, he was unbelievable on the Cowboys as a starter. Maybe he hasn't had such a great start to his Miami Dolphins career, but both of these guys are very, very good, high-level starting corners, and they're getting paid as such. Both getting paid. Xavier Howard, $90 million over 5 years. Byron Jones, $82.5 million over 5 years. These guys are getting paid in the top three of their team. So the Miami Dolphins definitely, definitely value these two guys to lock down the outside of the field, and they've done a great job of it, up until now.
Yeah, and Xavier Howard, I just want to point out, I mean, the he had a little bit of a down like a decline in season this year with the 5 interceptions, but 5 interceptions is great. 2020, 10 interceptions. I mean, come on, that's got to be that's very impressive. That's why he gets paid what he gets paid. Like you mentioned, $90 million. I mean, that's just for one of the best corners in the league. I mean, that's just what you're going to pay for. I mean, you pay for what you get, and Xavier Howard is a ball hawk, and he will lock down that number one receiver, like you were saying. And I think that's just what you're paying. You're paying for someone that you know that if you stick on their number one wide receiver, you mean he might let up a few passes, but I mean he has that upside where can create those turnovers. So I think that's just kind of what you're paying for as a defensive head coach. With Brian Flores last year, I think that's kind of what he decided. I think he wanted to have that guy that could, you know, have that guy where he could make turnovers, and I think that's just kind of what's important on defense, forcing those turnovers, let your offense get the ball, let them make plays.
Yeah, I definitely think Xavier Howard, sometimes he can get disrespected in that top cornerback conversation. But like you said, with his ball hawking ability, it's valuable. I mean, we saw a guy like Trayvon Diggs kind of came out of nowhere this past season, um, with his bunch of interceptions that he was getting, and that's a valuable trait to have. If you're getting the ball for your team on defense, that's what the offense wants. They want their defense to get them the ball. So any way that you can do it, if it's interceptions, if it's fumbles, or even just a turnover on downs, but you know, interceptions are obviously great with the whole field possession aspect. So I think
Yeah, for
Xavier
sure.
Howard's very, very valuable to the offense of this team and obviously the defense, but just getting them that great field position with his interception capability. So
Yeah.
rest of the corners, you have Noah Igbenogany, who was a first round pick in 2020, who hasn't gotten to that first round pick level yet, to say the least. I mean, he's really really struggled as of the beginning of his career. He hasn't really got to where the Dolphins want him to be, but he's still a very very young guy, only 22 years old. So there's plenty of room for him to grow and improve with these corners around him to help him, teach him all this stuff about being a top corner in the league. So I think Noah Igbenogany only played 6 games last season. Treat him like a rookie almost. We'll see what he does. I mean, I think it's too early to count him out of being, a serviceable corner in the NFL. And I think a guy like Nick Needham has showed a little bit more than what you got out of Noah Igbenogany. And Nick Needham last year has 2 interceptions. And he's played pretty decent. He's only 25 years old too. These guys are young. But I think Nick Needham is just a little bit more of that established guy so far, and Noah Igbenogany's more of that what could be type of guy, and you never know what you're gonna get until the season starts. So I think you have 4 pretty solid corners with Noah Igbenogany being kind of boom or bust. You don't know what you're going to get yet, but I think Nick Needham's a pretty solid third guy to have with your top two in Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. And then if you get Noah Igbenogany to turn into what you're hoping, that could be a really, really good, corner trio or maybe even 4 guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly just chomping at the bit to start talking about these safeties. Well, honestly, this one safety, Javon Holland, I'm just really waiting for you to get into it. I mean,
Yeah, I
this guy
mean,
that's just very young.
let's
I just want
let's
to
just
get
jump
talking to him.
into it right now then. So yeah, at the safety position, you have Javon Holland, as we just went over, and then you have a couple guys in rotation. Maybe you have Brandon Jones, maybe being your starter, maybe Eric Rowe. Um, I think that other side is a little bit more up in the air, but as you kind of hinted towards, Javon Holland has been unbelievable as a rookie. A second round pick this past year in 2021. He was a top safety in the NFL. So you're really, really happy with how Javon Holland came in and day one was able to really, really provide a strong impact for this defense. So he's able to use his speed and his, intelligence to really read a defense and make plays on the ball, make plays in the run game. I think Javon Holland is already a top 10 safety in the league. I feel like that's pretty easy to say for me. And he's 22 years old, so there's plenty of room for Javon Holland to grow and get even better. But yeah, you're super, super happy with Javon Holland.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said what I was gonna say, but I mean, he does like from like looking at his stats. I mean, he doesn't jump off the paper, but I mean, he makes those plays. I mean, he has 10 pass defense last year, rookie season. I mean, I mean, like you were mentioning, rookie at 22 years old. That's extremely young for a safety, and safeties are, I mean, great safeties are pretty hard to come by in these days. And Javon Holland, I mean, they kind of won the lottery, if I would say that, when it comes to drafting a great safety, because I mean, he kind of brings it to the table. I mean, once they get someone to kind of pair with him, I think it'll like how we were talking about in the Bills with Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. I think when they find that guy for him, I think he will be a great safety in this league, and I mean, it will only elevate him to the next level.
No, yeah, for sure. I think Um, Javon Holland coming in as a second round pick, you don't have a lot of second round picks that can be, dare I say, the best player on your defense this past year. I mean, I think so. So
Yeah, I mean,
You're definitely super super happy with how Javon Holland has turned out, and there's safeties in this league are disrespected in my opinion. I think it's really really valuable to have a good safety. I think you look at the teams that are doing well in the NFL, a lot of them have really good safeties. You see the Bengals this past year have one of my favorite safeties in Jesse Bates, locking down the back half of that defense, and you saw that Bengals defense take a big step this past year and play really well. So I think Javon Holland can grow into an even better player than he already is, and that's kind of scary for the rest of the league and especially the rest of this AFC East, which has to deal with him twice a year. So I think sky's the limit for Javon Holland, and like you said, I mean Brandon Jones, you're not, he's not terrible. He's third round pick in 2020, only 24 years old, room to grow, room to improve. But I think, if you're looking for that safety duo similar to your division rival in the Buffalo Bills, you're needing just a complement to Javon Holland at the moment.
yeah.
But I mean, to wrap up the defense, I think overall it's a solid unit. I think the front seven is a little bit weak, um, in comparison at least. I think the back half
The
of this
Bills,
defense,
yeah.
I think the DBs, the corners and the safeties for this team are a very, very big strong suit. I think, um, you're going to get a lot of production out of them. You're going to, win some games because of them. And, it's a little bit sad to see that they didn't maybe go to improve that defensive line a little bit more, maybe get these corners some help so they don't have to cover for so long. But they may do this past season and getting, like that veteran presence that you brought up earlier in Melvin Ingram, it definitely could help. Only time will tell. We said that earlier with the offense. I think it plays a fact to the defense too. This is a young defense overall. Um, a lot of these guys in the front seven are super, super young guys that definitely have room for improvement. So, maybe this past season not getting after the passer as much as you'd like, even with a guy like Brian Flores kind of scheming you up. Um, but I think it'll be interesting to see how this defense does without Brian Flores and how they can get after the passer. But I think that back end of the defense with the corners and the safeties will be rock solid for the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, it is going to be very interesting to see how their defense does play out with having more offensive minded head coach. How that's really going to switch up their mindset on defense. But I mean, when you compare them to like the Buffalo Bills, like how we were just talking about them earlier in the podcast, kind of uncomparable with the defense. I mean, the Buffalo Bills have a very strong unit, a very top heavy. I would say top half of the league in defense. Obviously, top five, top three. Defense in the NFL. But I mean, this defense, you're not mad with this defense, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. You're not looking for no one's gonna really you don't really have those big of holes. Obviously, you like you mentioned, the defensive line is a little bit of like a lack in what they need, like their need that they need to focus on maybe this next, you know what I mean, next offseason. But I definitely think this is a solid unit that they definitely can use to, mesh with the offense and how I think the offense this will help the offense get on the field more.
Definitely, for sure. I think, yeah, you said it. So I think we'll move on to special teams. Just touch on this really quick. You got Jason Sanders as your kicker. We just talked about Tyler Bass being a super solid kicker. Jason Sanders, yet again, super solid kicker. I mean, basically, if you're an NFL team that has a kicker who's been there for a couple years, you're basically pretty happy with that. Some of these teams are struggling, bringing guys in and out, in and out, in and out. But if you have a kicker that's there for a couple years and can kind of solidify himself. That's pretty valuable. And then you have your punter being Thomas Morstead, solid again, playing for the Saints, and we'll see how he does with the Miami Dolphins now.
Yeah, and kind of just like touching on the punt returner and kick returner. Obviously, Jalen Waddle is going to be that man back there for them. And like we touched on earlier in the podcast, earlier in this segment of the podcast, Jalen Waddle is just like a freak. He's a freak athlete, man. I mean, whenever he gets the ball in his hands, he's ready to make something happen. So I think him being that explosive factor back there at the start of, obviously at the end of a defensive drive for, yeah, I mean, at the end of yeah, getting the ball basically is what I'm trying to get at. Having the ball in his hands, he's able to make something happen, and I think that's just something that's important to do. Having someone that can make that play, and that's what Jalen Waddle can do. He's that explosive athlete.
Yes, he is. He is something. Um, and he's going to be a big part of this team. So I think to wrap it up, I think the Miami Dolphins really have a strong team here. I think, the addition of Tyreek Hill is going to be something that we kind of need to see how it works out. I believe that it will end up, benefiting them, and I think he'll unlock a new part of that Mike McDaniel offense that they may not have been able to get without him. So I think he was definitely a great addition. I think Teron Armstead's a great addition. They brought in players to help this team out. I think just all in all, this team is pretty solid all around. I think it's really, really just held down, unfortunately, by that quarterback room. I think Tua and Teddy just, in my opinion, aren't going to be able to get this team far enough, or as far as they're hoping. So I think it's also part of just how strong the AFC is. Even your AFC East opponents. We just did the Bills. The Bills are unbelievable. We'll get into the Patriots and the Jets later, but both of those teams are strong. You look at the Bengals are really strong. You got the Steelers, the Browns just brought in Deshaun Watson. You have um, the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. The AFC West obviously is maybe the best division in football. Like this is going to be a tough, tough, tough conference to compete in. I just think it's all really going to come down to the quarterback play. And if Tua can take that next step, then you could really see something here. But I don't see that happening as much as it seems like other people are projecting.
Yeah, I mean, I love the overview that you just gave of this team. I think the biggest thing that I want to hit on, like I said earlier in the podcast, is time will tell to see what really these people are really meant for. I mean, see what they really are about. I think time will tell. See if Tua will do good. Time will tell if the move was good. So I think the biggest thing that I would put a label on this team, time will tell to see what they're going to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I genuinely deep down believe this team got better this past offseason. It's just you look around the AFC, like I said, and every team got better basically. So it's just gonna be tough. We'll see how it goes though. Like you said, time will tell, and good luck to the Dolphins. And yeah, I mean, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for listening, watching to the Underground Football Podcast. I had a great time. I'm sure you did too, Priller.
Oh yeah,
And
all the time.
we'll get into the rest of the AFC East in the next episode, and we should get through the entire NFL pretty shortly here. We'll be pumping this stuff out, so make sure to stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and until next time.